The last thing she remembered was the smell of gasoline, thick and suffocating before the match struck. The flames should have devoured her. They should have left nothing but ashes. But when the fire touched Lena's skin, it didn't burn her. It chose her. Now, with embers whispering in her veins and a power no one understands, she's about to unleash a revenge so brutal it will rewrite the rules of nature itself. The bullies who try to burn her alive, they'll beg for mercy when they see what she's become. But something will happen next in this story that you would have never imagined. A twist so shocking it will make your blood run cold. From which country are you following Lena's fiery transformation? Let us know in the comments. And subscribe now, because the explosion is just beginning. This isn't just survival. This is evolution. And the fire has only just started speaking. The last thing she remembered was the smell of gasoline. It clung to her clothes, her hair, the back of her throat, thick and suffocating. The laughter around her was sharp, cutting through the crisp autumn air like broken glass. She could see their faces, twisted in amusement, eyes bright with something far worse than cruelty. It was delight. Pure, unfiltered delight. And then, the strike of the match. A tiny, insignificant sound, really. Just a scrape, a flicker. But in that moment, it was the loudest thing she had ever heard. The flame caught, dancing at the tip for a brief, suspended second before it fell. And then, fire. It roared to life, hungry and immediate, swallowing the gasoline-soaked fabric of her jacket in seconds. The heat was unbearable, the light blinding. She should have screamed. She should have run. But for one frozen, impossible heartbeat, she didn't move at all. Because the fire didn't burn her. It breathed with her. Lena Carter had always been invisible. Not the kind of invisible that made people wonder about her or whisper when she walked by. No, she was the kind of invisible that made people look right through her, as if she were nothing more than a shadow on the wall. She was quiet, the way prey is quiet, not out of meekness, but out of survival. She had learned early that drawing attention only made things worse. So she kept her head down, her mouth shut, and her thoughts locked away where no one could reach them. High school was a special kind of hell for people like her. The halls were a battlefield, and the rules were simple. You either fought or you were trampled. Lena had no interest in fighting. She just wanted to get through it one day at a time until she could leave this town and never look back. But Derek Valesky had other plans. Derek wasn't just popular. He was untouchable. Star quarterback, straight A student, the kind of golden boy who could do no wrong in the eyes of the teachers, the parents, the entire town. But Lena knew the truth. She had seen the way his smile curled at the edges when someone flinched. The way his laughter lingered a second too long when someone stumbled. He wasn't just cruel. He was careful. He knew exactly how far he could push before someone pushed back. And Lena? She was his favorite target. It started small. A shoved locker here. A whispered insult there. Tripping her in the cafeteria, spilling her tray, laughing as she scrambled to pick it up. The usual stuff. She never reacted. Never gave him the satisfaction. She thought, stupidly, that if she just endured it, he would get bored. Move on. Find someone else to torment. She was wrong. It escalated. A stolen notebook. A ruined project. Graffiti on her locker. Rumors whispered just loud enough for her to hear. And then, one day, the photos. Private ones. Ones she had never taken, never shared. But there they were, plastered across the school. Her face edited onto bodies that weren't hers. Crude words scrawled beneath them. That was the day something inside her snapped. She confronted him. Not in front of everyone. No, that would have been too easy. She waited until he was alone. Until he was walking to his car after practice, his smug grin still in place. She stepped out of the shadows, her voice low, shaking with something she didn't recognize. Asterisk why? Asterisk. He had laughed. Actually laughed. Like it was the dumbest question he had ever heard. Because I can, he said, shrugging. Asterisk, because it's fun. Asterisk. And then he flicked the lighter in his hand, the flame dancing between them. Asterisk, you're nothing, Lena. You always have been. Asterisk. She should have walked away. She didn't. The next day, the rumors got worse. The photos spread further. The laughter followed her like a second shadow. And then, after school, they cornered her. Derek and his friends, their faces alight with anticipation. Someone had a can of gasoline. Someone else had a match. And then, fire. But not the way they expected. Because when the flames touched her skin, they didn't burn. They listened. And Lena? She smiled. The fire should have killed her. That was the first thought that cut through the haze in Lena's mind as she stood frozen in the school parking lot. Gasoline fumes still thick in the air. The flames had swallowed her whole, licking hungrily at her clothes, her skin, her hair. But where there should have been agony, there was only warmth. A terrible, impossible warmth that pulsed through her veins like a second heartbeat. Derek's scream shattered the silence first. His hands, the same hands that had struck the match, were blistering, red and angry where the fire had leaped back at him. His friends scrambled away, their faces twisted in horror, sneakers screeching against asphalt. One of them, Tyler, was batting frantically at his jacket where embers smoldered. But Lena? Lena was untouched. She lifted her hands slowly, turning them over in the fading light. The fire had retreated from her skin, but she could still feel it, not just around her, but inside her. A living thing curled beneath her ribs, breathing when she breathed, waiting. W, what are you? Derek's voice was raw, his usual confidence shattered. He cradled his burned hand against his chest, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. Lena didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was, she didn't know. A shout came from the school doors. A teacher, maybe, or a janitor. Footsteps pounded closer. Lena didn't wait to see who it was. She turned and ran, her legs moving before her mind could catch up, the taste of smoke still thick on her tongue. 3 hours later, the shower ran scalding hot, steam fogging the bathroom mirror, but Lena barely felt it. She scrubbed at her skin until it was raw, as if she could wash away the memory of the fire. The way it had moved for her, obeyed her. It made no sense. Fire wasn't alive. Fire didn't listen. And yet, she turned off the water with a shaking hand and wrapped herself in a towel. Her reflection in the fogged mirror was blurred, indistinct. A ghost. A knock at the bathroom door made her jump. Lena. Her mother's voice was muffled through the wood. Are you okay in there? Lena swallowed hard. Yeah, fine. You've been in there a long time. I'll be out in a minute. A pause. Then, quieter, the school called. Lena's stomach dropped. They said there was an incident. That's some boys. Her mother's voice cracked. They said they hurt you. Lena closed her eyes. She could still smell the gasoline. Lena, please. Talk to me. What could she say? That the fire hadn't burned her? That she had somehow, impossibly, controlled it? They'd lock her up. They'd call her a freak. Worse. I'm fine, she lied. It was just a stupid prank. Another pause. Then, resigned. Dinner's ready when you are. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Lena waited until they faded before she turned back to the mirror, wiping away the steam with her palm. Her face stared back at her, pale, hollow-eyed. Familiar. And yet, she held up her hand, focusing on that strange warmth in her chest, the ember that hadn't gone out. A spark flickered to life in her palm. Small, contained, but there. Midnight. Lena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers tracing idle patterns in the air. Tiny flames followed her movements, dancing just above her skin before winking out again. She should have been terrified, and part of her was. But another part, a deeper, darker part, thrummed with something like excitement. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't powerless. Derek's burned hands flashed in her memory. The way he'd looked at her after, like she was something to be afraid of. A knock at her window made her bolt upright, the flames snuffing out instantly. Her room was on the second floor. Heart pounding, she crept to the window and peered through the blinds. Derek stood on the lawn below, his face pale in the moonlight, his burned hand wrapped in bandages. Their eyes met, and then he turned and ran. Lena didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the street below, waiting for Derek to come back. He didn't, but the message was clear. He knew something was wrong with her. And if he knew, it was only a matter of time before others found out. She had to be careful. School the next morning was a minefield. Whispers followed her through the halls, but no one dared to get too close. Derek was absent, and his friends, usually so loud, so obnoxious, were eerily quiet, their eyes darting away when she passed. Good. Let them be afraid. The fire inside her pulsed in agreement. Lunchtime. Lena sat alone at her usual table, picking at her food, when a tray slammed down across from her. You're not human. Mira Santos, Derek's ex-girlfriend, of all people, leaned forward, her dark eyes blazing. Lena tensed. What? I saw what happened yesterday, Mira hissed, keeping her voice low. The fire didn't touch you. It burned Derek, but not you. She paused. Ow! Lena's pulse roared in her ears. You're imagining things. Mira snorted. I know what I saw. She glanced around, then lowered her voice further. And I know what Derek's planning. He's scared of you. That's why he came to your house last night. Lena's breath caught. How do you know that? Because he called me after. Myra's lips twisted. He thinks you're some kind of monster. A slow, cold smile spread across Lena's face. Maybe I am. After school, the note in Lena's locker was simple. Asterisk, meet me at the old mill. Alone. We need to talk. D asterisk. Lena crumpled it in her fist, feeling the heat rise in her palms. This was a trap, and she was going to walk right into it. The old mill loomed before her, its broken windows like empty eye sockets staring blindly into the night. Lena's breath fogged in the cold air as she approached, her sneakers crunching over dead leaves and broken glass. The river behind the building rushed angrily, swollen with recent rains, its churning waters the only sound in the otherwise silent woods. She knew it was a trap the moment she saw the note. Derek wasn't clever enough to come up with something subtle. The crude block letters, the demand to come alone, the choice of location, all of it screamed setup. But Lena found she didn't care. The fire in her chest had been simmering all day, restless and hungry, and the thought of finally unleashing it made her fingers twitch at her sides. The first sign she wasn't alone came when a twig snapped somewhere to her left. Lena didn't turn. She kept walking toward the mill's gaping doorway, her posture relaxed, her hands loose at her sides. Let them think they had the advantage. Let them think she was scared. Looking for someone? Derek's voice echoed from inside the mill, bouncing off the rotting wooden beams. Lena stepped through the doorway, her eyes adjusting quickly to the gloom. Moonlight streamed through holes in the roof, painting silver puddles on the warped floorboards. Derek stood in the center of the main room, flanked by Tyler and Mark. Jake was conspicuously absent. All three wore identical expressions of smug anticipation, though Lena didn't miss the way Derek's bandaged hand trembled slightly at his side. Where's Jake? Lena asked, her voice calm. Derek smirked. Had a change of heart. Guess not everyone's cut out for this. Lena nodded slowly. She could smell the gasoline before she saw the can at Mark's feet. The scent sent a jolt through her, memories of heat and flame flashing behind her eyes. You brought a bat and some gas, she observed, glancing at Tyler's weapon. That's cute. You really thought that would work on me twice. Derek's smirk faltered. He'd expected fear, maybe pleading. Not this cool amusement. It threw him off balance, and Lena saw the exact moment his confidence cracked. Shut up, he snapped. You're not walking away this time, freak. Lena tilted her head. No, she agreed softly. I'm not. Then she let the fire out. It erupted from her skin in a wave of blistering heat, rolling outward in a perfect circle. The old, dry wood of the mill exploded into flame instantly, walls and ceiling becoming a roaring inferno in seconds. Derek screamed, stumbling back as the fire licked at his shoes. Tyler swung the bat wildly, as if he could beat back the flames, while Mark made a desperate grab for the gasoline can, a fatal mistake. The metal container detonated in his hands, the explosion sending him flying backward into a burning support beam. Lena watched dispassionately as his clothes caught fire, his screams joining the crackling roar of the mill's destruction. Derek was backing toward what remained of the doorway, his face a mask of terror. Stop, he shrieked. Make it stop. Lena stepped through the flames, unharmed, the fire parting around her like a living thing. Why? She asked, genuinely curious. You didn't stop when I asked. She reached for him, her fingers brushing his cheek. Just a feather-light touch, but it was enough. Derek's skin blackened instantly, the burn spreading outward in rippling waves as he collapsed to his knees, howling. Tyler chose that moment to charge, bat raised high. Lena didn't even turn. She simply raised her other hand, and a whip of flame lashed out, wrapping around the bat and reducing it to ash in an instant. Tyler's momentum carried him forward, right into her waiting fist. The fire transferred on contact, racing up his arms, across his chest. His screams joined Derek's in a horrific duet as the mill's roof began to collapse around them. Lena walked calmly through the chaos, untouched by the destruction she'd wrought. At the doorway, she paused to look back. Derek was crawling toward her, one hand outstretched, his face a ruin of blisters and burns. "Please," he gasped. "I'm sorry. Aunt." Lena considered him for a long moment. Then she turned and stepped outside, letting the collapsing building finish what she'd started. The walk home was quiet, peaceful. The fire inside her had settled, content for now. As she reached her street, she saw the first glow of sirens in the distance, racing toward the column of smoke rising from the woods. Her mother was waiting on the porch, face drawn with worry. "Lena, where have you been? There's a huge fire out by the old mill, and..." "I was at the library," Lena said smoothly, brushing past her. "Studying. Up in her room." She sat by the window, watching the distant glow. Her phone buzzed, Mira again. Asterisk, they're saying it was an accident. Faulty wiring or some shit. But I know you were there. Asterisk. Lena smiled faintly and typed back. Asterisk, prove it. Asterisk. She powered off her phone and lay back on her bed, listening to the distant wail of sirens. The fire inside her pulsed warmly, satisfied. For now. Morning came with the stench of smoke still hanging over the town. Lena dressed methodically, choosing a loose sweatshirt despite the autumn chill. No need to draw attention to her unmarked skin. Downstairs, the TV droned with news of the tragic accident. Authorities confirm 3 bodies recovered from the wreckage, all local high school students. The cause of the fire remains under investigation. Her mother gasped, "Oh my God, those poor boys." Lena poured herself a bowl of cereal, the milk turning the flakes to mush as she stared blankly at the screen. The news showed footage of the smoking ruins, then cut to tearful interviews with grieving parents. Derek's mother sobbed uncontrollably, begging for answers. It should have made her feel something. Guilt, maybe. Satisfaction. But there was only emptiness. The walk to school was surreal. Groups of students huddled together, some crying, others whispering furiously. The air buzzed with rumors. It was a drug deal gone bad, a suicide pact, a hate crime. No one even glanced at Lena as she moved through the crowds. Mira found her at lunch, sliding into the seat across from her with red-rimmed eyes. "They're dead," she whispered. Lena sipped her soda. "I know. You killed them." Lena met her gaze evenly. "Prove it." A long silence stretched between them. Myra's hands shook where they clutched her tray. "I could go to the police," she said finally. "You could," Lena agreed. "And tell them what? That I have magic fire powers? That I burned down a building without a single mark on me?" She leaned forward. "They'll lock you up faster than they'd lock me." Mira swallowed hard. "What are you?" Lena considered the question. "Free," she said at last. The rest of the week passed in a blur of fake sympathy and whispered rumors. The police came to school, questioning students, but their interviews with Lena were brief and perfunctory. No one suspected the quiet girl who had no connection to the victims. By Friday, the town had begun to move on. There were memorials and candlelight vigils, but already the horror was fading, becoming just another tragic story. Lena sat on her bed that night, running a flame over her knuckles, watching it dance across her skin. The power was growing stronger, easier to control. She could feel it learning her, adapting to her will. A knock at her window made her jerk, the flame extinguishing instantly. No one should have been able to reach her second-story window. Slowly, she crossed the room and pulled back the curtain. A man stood on the thin branch outside her window, impossibly balanced, his dark eyes gleaming in the moonlight. When he smiled, his teeth seemed too sharp. "Hello, little matchstick," he murmured, his voice like crackling embers. "I've been looking for you." The branch shouldn't have held his weight. That was Lena's first thought as she stared at the man balanced precariously outside her second-story window. The oak limb was barely thicker than her wrist, yet he stood there effortlessly, one hand resting against the glass like gravity didn't apply to him. Her second thought was that his eyes were wrong. Not the color, though they were an unnerving shade of amber, but the way they reflected the streetlight behind her. They glittered like molten metal, like the heart of fire. "Open the window, little matchstick," the man murmured. His voice was smooth, but beneath it Lena heard something else, a crackle like burning logs settling in a hearth. Her fingers twitched at her sides. The fire inside her chest stirred, not in fear but in recognition. "Who are you?" she demanded, not moving. His smile widened, revealing those two sharp teeth again. "A friend. Someone who understands what you are." One long finger tapped the glass. "You must have questions." Lena hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that normal men didn't appear outside windows at midnight with eyes like bank coals. But the fire in her chest pulsed eagerly, whispering that this was important. She unlocked the window and slid it up halfway. Cold autumn air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and something else, something wild and ancient that made the hairs on Lena's arms stand up. The stranger didn't climb through. He simply stood there, studying her with those impossible eyes. Up close, she could see his skin had a faint, almost golden sheen to it, like sunlight glancing off bronze. "You killed those boys," he said conversationally. Lena's breath caught. "I don't know what you were." "Don't lie to me," he interrupted, though not unkindly. "And don't bother lying to yourself. The fire doesn't lie. It only ever consumes or creates." He tilted his head. "In your case, it did both." Her palms were sweating. She could feel heat building in them, ready to be unleashed if this went bad. "What do you want?" "To help," he said simply, "before someone less friendly finds you." A car passed on the street below, its headlights briefly illuminating the stranger's face. For a fraction of a second, Lena saw something beneath his human facade, something made of flame and shadow, shifting like a mirage. Then it was gone, leaving only the handsome, sharp-featured man. "You're like me," she breathed. His smile turned sad. "Not exactly, but close enough." He reached into his jacket. Lena tensed and pulled out a small card. "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Come alone." The card was blank, except for an address scrawled in what looked like charcoal. When Lena glanced up, the branch was empty, the stranger gone as if he'd never been there at all. The address led to an old brick building on the outskirts of the industrial district. The sign out front read, "Ember and Forge, Custom Metalworks," but the windows were dark, the parking lot empty except for a single motorcycle. Lena hesitated at the door, her fingers tingling with pent-up energy. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning as the stranger's words echoed in her mind. Someone less friendly. What did that mean? Who else was out there? The door swung open before she could knock. Punctual, the stranger observed. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a black t-shirt that showed off-corded arms covered in intricate tattoos that seemed to shift in the low light. Good. The interior of the shop was nothing like Lena expected. Instead of machinery and tools, the space had been converted into something between an apartment and a library. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound tomes and strange artifacts. A massive iron furnace dominated one corner, glowing faintly despite having no visible fuel source. "Sit," the stranger said, gesturing to a worn couch. "We have much to discuss." Lena remained standing. "Start with your name." He chuckled. "Names have power, little matchstick. But you can call me Cade." He moved to the furnace, running a hand along its surface. "And you're Lena Carter, age 17, who survived being set on fire only to discover she couldn't be burned." Her stomach tightened. "How do you know that?" "Because it's my job to know." Cade turned, his eyes catching the furnace's glow. "There are more of us than you'd think. People touched by fire changed by it. He held up his hand, and a flame blossomed in his palm. But unlike Lena's, his fire was blue at the core, almost white-hot. We call ourselves embers. Lena couldn't help it. She took a step closer, fascinated despite herself. There are others? Many. Scattered, but everywhere. Cade closed his fist, extinguishing the flame. And not all of them are friendly. Something in his tone made her skin prickle. What aren't you telling me? Cade sighed and sat on the edge of a work table. When an ember first manifests, it sends out a sort of signal, like a flare in the darkness. His gaze locked onto hers. Yours was particularly bright, and there are those who hunt our kind, Lena, who would kill you for what you are. The furnace roared suddenly, flames licking higher as if in response to his words. In the flickering light, Lena saw the truth in Cade's eyes. She wasn't just powerful, she was prey. Lena stared at the dancing blue flames in Cade's palm, her own fingers twitching with barely restrained energy. The heat in her chest pulsed in time with the flickering fire, as if recognizing a kindred spirit. You're saying I'm some kind of fire mutant? She asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Cade snorted, snapping his fingers to extinguish the flames. Mutant, mage, blessed, cursed. We've been called many things over the centuries. He pushed off the work table and moved to a bookshelf, pulling down a heavy tome bound in what looked like charred leather. The truth is simpler. We're humans who've been fundamentally altered by fire's touch. He dropped the book onto a nearby table with a thud that sent up a small cloud of ash. When he opened it, Lena caught glimpses of handwritten pages interspersed with strange symbols that seemed to shift when she looked directly at them. Cade flipped through the brittle pages until he found what he was looking for. A sketch of a figure wreathed in flames, their arms outstretched toward what looked like a burning city. Embers aren't born, he said, tracing the illustration with one calloused finger. We're made. Through trauma, through sacrifice, through surviving something that should have killed us. His amber eyes lifted to meet hers. Tell me, Lena, when a fire took you, what did you feel? The memory crashed over her like a wave. The gasoline smell, Derek's laughing face, the moment the match fell. I felt. She swallowed hard. Angry. So angry it burned worse than the flames. Cade nodded as if she confirmed something. That's the spark. The moment when fire stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you are. He closed the book with a puff of ember-scented air. Most don't survive the transformation. Their bodies burn like any other. But a few what? A few catch fire from the inside out. Cade's voice dropped to a near whisper. And we burn forever. Lena's mouth went dry. She thought of the endless heat in her chest, the way flames danced at her fingertips whenever she grew emotional. Is that what's happening to me? Am I just burning up slowly? Not if you learn control. Cade moved suddenly, crossing the space between them in 2 long strides. Before Lena could react, he grabbed her wrist and pressed her palm against the side of the roaring furnace. She gasped, expecting agony, but instead of searing pain, there was only warmth. A strange, pulsing warmth that traveled up her arm and settled in her chest alongside her own fire. The first lesson, Cade said, his face inches from hers, is that fire speaks. You just have to listen. For 3 hours, Cade had her keep her hand pressed to the furnace while he talked. Fire has memory, he explained, pacing around the workshop. It remembers every life it's ever taken, every home it's ever destroyed, every forest it's ever ravaged. He tapped his temple, and if you're connected to it, you can access those memories. Lena shifted uncomfortably, her arm beginning to ache from being held in one position for so long. What good does that do? Knowledge. Power. Warning. Cade stopped behind her, his breath warm against her ear. Close your eyes. Breathe in. Tell me what you smell. She obeyed, inhaling deeply. At first there was just the expected scent of burning coal, but then, pine, she murmured, surprised. And snow. Good. What else? The images came in flashes. A log cabin surrounded by towering evergreens, the wood blackening as flames licked up its sides. a man screaming as he tried to beat out the fire engulfing his overalls. The acrid stench of melting rubber. Tires, Lena gasped, her eyes flying open. There were tires burning. Kate nodded approvingly and finally released her wrist. The Great Fire of 1910. Over 3 million acres burned across Washington, Idaho, and Montana. He patted the furnace almost affectionately. This old girl was forged from salvaged metal after that fire. She remembers. Lena flexed her stiff fingers, staring at the unmarked skin. So all fire is alive? Not alive. Connected. Cade moved to a cabinet and pulled out 2 chipped mugs and a battered kettle. Think of it like a web. Every flame that's ever burned is linked to every other flame. And now, he filled the kettle from a sink in the corner and placed it directly into the furnace's heart. You're part of that web. As they waited for the water to boil, Kate explained more about Ember history, how they'd been both worshipped and hunted throughout the ages, how some had used their gifts to become healers while others became weapons. The strongest of us can pull heat from the air itself, he said, pouring steaming water into the mugs. The tea leaves, he added, hissed and curled. The weakest can barely light a candle without burning themselves. His eyes flicked to Lena. You little matchstick are something else entirely. She accepted the mug he offered, not missing how his fingers lingered near hers just a bit too long, testing her heat. What do you mean? Most embers manifest in their early 20s, sometimes younger, if the trauma is severe enough. Kate blew on his tea, but 17? That's nearly unheard of. In your control. He shook his head. Either you're natural, or something woke the fire in you earlier than it should have. Lena thought of all the times she'd nearly burned her house down as a child, the way her temper always seemed to make the air around her shimmer. What happens now? Now, Kate set his mug down with a decisive click. Now we see how powerful you really are. He led her to a cleared space in the center of the workshop where the concrete floor had been stained black from countless fires. With a wave of his hand, he gestured for her to stand in the center. Call your fire, he commanded. Lena hesitated. Here, inside. Kate's grin was all sharp edges. What's the matter? Afraid you'll burn the place down? The challenge in his voice sparked something in her chest. Without another word, Lena closed her eyes and reached for the heat always simmering beneath her skin. It came eagerly, rushing up her arms in waves of golden flame. Within seconds, she was engulfed, fire dancing across her body in intricate patterns. She heard Cade's sharp intake of breath, but didn't open her eyes. Couldn't. Not when the fire was singing to her in a language of crackles and pops that somehow made perfect sense. Then something changed. The flames around her flickered, then darkened at the edges, turning from gold to orange to a deep, unnatural crimson. The heat in her chest pulsed painfully, and suddenly she wasn't just hearing the fire. She was hearing voices. Burn them all. They deserve it. Let the world feel your wrath. Lena gasped, staggering back as the flames roared higher, now licking at the workshop ceiling. The voices grew louder, more insistent, until they drowned out everything else. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders. Lena, look at me. Cade's voice cut through the cacophony. Lena forced her eyes open to see him standing impossibly close, his own skin glowing faintly gold where it touched hers. Push it down, he ordered, his face taut with strain. Now, with a monumental effort, Lena wrestled the fire back under her skin. The crimson flames faded to gold, then to embers, then to nothing at all. As the last spark winked out, her legs gave way, but Cade caught her before she could hit the floor. What the hell was that? She panted, her whole body trembling. Cade's expression was grim as he helped her to a chair. That, he said quietly, was why you're in danger. He knelt before her, his normally confident demeanor replaced by something far more serious. Most embers just control fire, but a rare few, they hear it too. The voices of every flame that's ever burned. His grip on her hands tightened. The Pyreborn. Lena's mouth went dry. And that's bad. Cade's eyes reflected the furnace's glow as he answered. It means you're not just an ember, Lena. You're the closest thing to a living wildfire this world has ever seen. He swallowed hard. And there are people who would kill to control that power. The city burned. Lena stood at the heart of the storm, flames swirling around her in a maelstrom of crimson and gold. The battle had raged for hours, Kate at her side, the rogue embers pressing their attack, the air thick with smoke and the scent of scorched metal. But now, only one enemy remained. Victor Kane, the self-proclaimed Pyre King, staggered to his feet across the ruined square. His once impeccable suit hung in charred tatters, his skin blistered from Lena's last attack, yet his eyes still burned with fanatical fire. "You think you've won?" he spat, blood dripping from his split lip. "You're just a child playing with forces you don't understand." Lena flexed her fingers, feeling the fire respond eagerly. "I understand enough." Around them, the remains of Kane's followers lay unconscious or fleeing. Cade limped to Lena's side, his left arm hanging useless from a deep burn. "Finish it," he urged quietly. Kane laughed, a broken, rasping sound. "Yes, little matchstick. Finish it. Prove you're just as monstrous as they say." The flames around Lena pulsed, whispering their endless hunger. Asterisk, burn him. Burn them all. Let the world fear your name. Asterisk. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she remembered Derek's laughter as the match fell. Remembered the fear in Myra's eyes when she realized what Lena could do. Remembered every cruel word, every mocking glance, every time the world had tried to break her. The fire roared in response to her fury. But then, she thought of Cade standing between her and certain death. Of her mother's tearful embrace when she finally returned home. Of the terrified civilians they'd evacuated before the battle. Lena took a deep breath and let the fire go. The flames didn't attack Kane. Instead, they rushed inward, collapsing into Lena's chest with a force that knocked her to her knees. The sudden vacuum of air extinguished every remaining fire in the square, leaving only smoke and silence. Kane stared in disbelief. What have you done?" Lena raised her head, exhausted but clear-eyed. "I chose." Cade's hand came to rest on her shoulder as emergency sirens wailed in the distance. "We need to go." She nodded, allowing him to help her up. As they turned to leave, Kane's enraged scream followed them. "This isn't over. The fire will always call to its children." Lena didn't look back. Epilogue, 1 month later. The old mill's charred remains had been cleared away, replaced by a small memorial garden. Lena stood at its edge, hands buried in her jacket pockets, watching leaves skitter across the fresh pavement. "You're late," Mira said from behind her. Lena turned to see her former classmate, now something resembling a friend, holding 2 coffee cups. She accepted one with a small smile. "I had to check on my mom." Mira nodded knowingly. After everything that had happened, the battle, the cover-up, the official story about a gas line explosion, Lena's mother had become understandably protective. "They still talking about reopening the case?" Mira asked as they walked. "Always." Lena sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth that had nothing to do with her power. "But without evidence, it's just conspiracy theories," Mira finished. She hesitated. "And Cade's gone underground. Says there are others like me out there, and he needs to warn them before Kane's people find them." Lena's fingers tightened around the cup. "He'll be back." They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the school parking lot. The autumn sun painted everything in golden light, and for the first time in months, Lena felt something like peace. The fire still murmured in her chest, of course. It always would, but now she understood it wasn't just destruction. It was warmth. It was light. It was hers to control. Mira elbowed her gently. "You coming?" Bell's about to ring. Lena took one last look at the sky, then fell into step beside her. "Yeah," she said. "Let's go." The end.